The last phone call of Brandon Swanson, 47 minutes. Then silence. Let's start with the part that makes this story different. Not the mystery. Not the theories. Not even the disappearance. The part that hits people in the chest is this: someone was on the phone with Brandon Swanson as he walked through the dark. For 47 minutes. And then the conversation ended with 2 words: "Oh, shit." After that, Brandon was never heard from again. If you like true crime, you've heard 100 openings like this. But this case doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like the kind of mistake any of us could make, late at night, tired, a little embarrassed, convinced we know where we are. Because nothing about Brandon's night began like a headline. Brandon Swanson was 19 years old. He was from Marshall, Minnesota. He was a student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College, studying wind turbines. It was May 2008. The school year had just ended on May 13, 2008. So Brandon did what a lot of students do. He stayed around Canby, Minnesota, and celebrated with friends. He went to 2 parties that night. He drank alcohol, but friends later said it wasn't enough to make him seem visibly intoxicated. This matters because it keeps the story grounded. The beginning isn't sinister. It's ordinary. Before midnight, Brandon left Canby for the roughly 30-mile drive toward Marshall. It's the kind of drive that feels easy until it's not: dark, rural roads, few landmarks, long stretches where everything looks the same. And then, somewhere along that route, his car went off the road into a ditch. The car was a Chevrolet Lumina. Not a catastrophic crash. No explosion. No twisted wreck. More like one bad moment on a road that doesn't forgive mistakes. Brandon wasn't hurt. But he couldn't free the vehicle. So just before 2 a.m., he called his parents. Imagine getting that call. Your phone lights up in the middle of the night. Your child's name is on the screen. And you're bracing for something terrible. But Brandon's voice isn't screaming. He tells them he's okay. He says the car is stuck. He needs a ride. Then he says something that sounds reassuring. And turns out to be the most dangerous thing he could believe. He tells them he thinks he's near Lind, Minnesota. If you've never driven rural roads, it's hard to explain how that kind of mistake happens. But here's the simplest version: at night, your brain doesn't navigate with accuracy. It navigates with confidence. His parents, Annette and Brian, get in their pickup and drive out to pick him up. They keep him on the phone. At first, Brandon stays with the car and tries to help them locate him. He flashes his lights. They flash theirs. But they can't see him. And he can't see them. There are occasional hang-ups and drops in the call. That kind of detail sounds minor, until you imagine it happening while you're trying to save time in the dark. Minutes turn into longer minutes. And you can feel the mood shift. Not into panic yet. Into confusion. Because confusion is the first step toward disaster. Eventually, Brandon tells them he can see lights in the distance. That detail is so human. Because when you're stuck on a dark road, lights don't just look like a place. They look like an answer. Brandon believes those lights mean Lind is close. He believes he can walk to town. So he makes a decision. He leaves the car and walks toward those lights. He tells his father to go to the parking lot of a local bar in Lind and wait there. He says he'll meet them. And then Brandon starts walking. This is where the story tightens. Because from this point forward, nothing happens quickly. It happens slowly. Step by step. Fence by fence. Brandon stays on the phone with his father for 47 minutes. His father later recalled Brandon mentioned passing fences and hearing nearby water. If you've ever walked across uneven land at night, you know how the ground lies. A shallow ditch can feel like a drop. A thin stream can sound like a river. A fence can be a simple hop, until your foot catches and the night turns sharp. Meanwhile, Brandon's parents are still driving. They're still searching. But they're searching where they think he is. And Brandon is walking where he thinks he's going. Two separate maps. Two separate realities. Then, shortly after 2:30 a.m. minus 47 minutes into the call, Brandon interrupts himself. He says, "Oh, shit." And then he goes silent for the remainder of the call. Not a long explanation. Not a clear description of what happened. Just the sudden absence of his voice. His parents call out to him. They try to get him to respond. They hang up and make multiple attempts to call him back. No answer. Morning arrives, and now there's only one thing left to do: report him missing. At 6:30 a.m., Brandon's parents report him missing to Lind Police. And the response they get becomes part of why this case mattered beyond Brandon himself. They're told at first it's hardly unusual for young men his age to stay out all night. Annette later recalled an officer telling her Brandon had a right to be missing. If you've ever loved someone, you know how that sentence lands. It doesn't feel like policy. It feels like a door closing. Later that morning, police begin searching but find no trace of Brandon in or around Lind. And they quickly run into the same problem the parents had all night. Where do you search? If the location is wrong? To narrow it down, law enforcement obtains Brandon's cell phone records. And those records change everything. They show Brandon had been calling from the vicinity of Taunton, near Porter, along State Highway 68. That location was about 25 miles, or 40 kilometers, from Lind. In other words, they had been searching the wrong world. Once the search shifts, deputies find Brandon's car in a ditch off a gravel road near the Lincoln County line, about 1 mile north of Highway 68. A sheriff later explained the car was hung up on an incline enough to keep the wheels from touching the ground on one side. The car becomes a silent witness, but it doesn't give the answer people want. There was nothing else found clearly amiss with the vehicle. The surrounding area, grass and gravel, didn't preserve tracks, so investigators couldn't tell which direction Brandon started walking. And that is another brutal detail. A person can vanish. Not because they're invisible, but because the environment refuses to record the evidence. Now the search becomes real. Not drive around and look for headlights. A coordinated effort. Multiple agencies become involved, including neighboring counties, because the area sits near multiple jurisdictions. That multi-county overlap wasn't just frustrating, it complicated coordination from the start. To focus the search further, investigators note Brandon's call had been routed through a cell tower near Minneota, at the intersection of county routes 3 and 10. By May 15th, investigators had narrowed the likely call area to within about 5 miles of that tower. And now, the question isn't where is Lind? The question is, what happened in these fields? Search dogs are brought in. A team of bloodhounds from Cottington County, South Dakota, picks up a scent trail. The trail is described as roughly 3 miles long. It follows field roads west-northwest to an abandoned farm. Then it continues along the Yellow Medicine River to a point where it appears to enter the water. This is where one of the biggest theories takes shape, the river theory. An accidental fall. A slip on a bank. A misstep in the dark. Drowning. And it's not a casual idea. Authorities respond as if it could be real. Boats from the state's Department of Natural Resources are deployed on the river. Gates are installed. Deputies walk the banks. Horses and ATVs are used in surrounding areas. One official noted that in some areas the water had been about 10 feet deep the morning Brandon disappeared, and later dropped. In a case like this, details like depth and current matter. Because they create a terrifying possibility. If Brandon went into that river, he may have been carried somewhere no one expected. But then reality delivers the part that makes this case so enduring. Even with extensive searching, no body is found. No phone is found. No clothing or jewelry is found. And when nature doesn't deliver an answer, the human mind starts generating its own. If the story ended there, it would be tragic, but not rare. A young man. A dark rural night. Water nearby. A recovery that never came. But the Swanson case didn't stop. Because the searching didn't stop. After the original search produced no sign of Brandon, most efforts were discontinued. But one sheriff continued walking a 2-mile stretch of the Yellow Medicine River every day for 30 days. And the seasonal reality of farmland changed how searches happened next. Searches resumed late that fall, after fields planted shortly after the disappearance had been harvested. Then again in spring, after snow melted but before planting. This cycle continued through 2011. By that time, an enormous area had been searched, about 122 square miles. In 2010, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension took over as the lead agency. A tip line was set up. By 2015, 90 leads had been reported through that tip line. Over time, the official area of interest moved toward Mud Creek, a tributary north and northwest of Porter. This is the part that messes with people who hear the story. Because it proves one thing. Brandon didn't just disappear. He was looked for. Again. And again. In different seasons. Under different conditions. Across a huge area. And he still wasn't found. Meanwhile, Brandon's parents lived inside what they called the not knowing. Annette described it as ambiguous loss, a constant state of searching without answers. And they didn't just search fields. They searched the system. Because in their minds, the beginning of the story had a second tragedy. They tried to report their son missing, and the first reaction was to wait. They weren't alone in that experience. For years, many places treated adult disappearances like a choice until proven otherwise. But Brandon's case became one of the cases that forced a change. In May 2009, Minnesota passed what's widely known as Brandon's Law. It was signed on May 7, 2009, by Governor Tim Pawlenty. It took effect at the beginning of July 2009. The change was simple in concept but powerful in practice. Police must begin investigating missing adults promptly. They must make an initial determination about dangerous circumstances. They must notify other nearby law enforcement agencies quickly. It also clarified which agency is the lead agency, something that had caused problems when multiple counties were involved in the initial search. And it limited the reasons police could refuse or delay a report, like assuming the person left intentionally or insisting not enough time had passed. Brandon's parents lobbied hard for this change. They worked with state lawmakers, including then Representative Marty Seifert. It wouldn't solve Brandon's case. But it could stop the next family from hearing a sentence like, "He has a right to be missing." So what happened to Brandon? The honest answer is, we don't know. But the theories fall into a few buckets, and each one has reasons people consider it. Theory 1, accident. A fall in the dark. An injury that left him unable to call for help. Exhaustion. Exposure. It fits the environment. It fits the time. It fits how quickly a confident walk can turn dangerous on rural ground. Theory 2, the river. The dog trail appeared to enter the Yellow Medicine River. Authorities treated that possibility seriously enough to deploy boats and install gates. Brandon's father recalled Brandon mentioned hearing water. But even inside that theory, there's debate. Annette has said she didn't think there was clear indication Brandon was in the river. One reason cited is that after reaching the water, the dog continued on the other side and along the bank to another gravel road where the trail ended. Theory 3, foul play. It hasn't been ruled out, even though there was no evidence of it found at the car. And that's the harsh truth about disappearances. Sometimes the absence of evidence isn't proof. It's simply the dark doing what the dark does best, keeping secrets. But here is what may be the most realistic way to understand this case. This is a story about disorientation. Not just getting lost. Disorientation is when your confidence is higher than your accuracy. When your brain builds a map that feels true. When a distant light becomes a destination. Investigators noted that a red light atop a Taunton grain elevator could be seen from the area, and it might have misled Brandon into thinking Lynn was within walking distance. That kind of mistake doesn't require a villain. It doesn't require a conspiracy. It doesn't even require intoxication. It only requires darkness, distance, and a human brain trying to be helpful. And it creates the cruelest kind of tragedy. Because Brandon wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was trying to get home. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a phone call. A young man walking. A father listening. A night that should have ended with headlights meeting in a parking lot. Instead, it ended with 2 words. Oh, shit. That's why the story lasts. Not because it's supernatural. Not because it's complicated. Because it's simple. A small mistake. A wrong assumption. A set of lights that looked like safety. And a silence that never ended. If you were on that call, what do you think happened in the moment Brandon said those words? And if you want more true cases told with careful timelines and verified facts, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. The Unseen Files 33, Gone doesn't mean forgotten.